Tonight, we journey to the hidden kingdom of Eldoria, where shadows linger and a young hero named Alaric seeks a legendary dragon to restore light to his land. Let each word carry you gently to a place of magic and mystery, easing you into peaceful sleep. In the realm of Eldoria, a kingdom once vibrant and resplendent, shadows crept upon the land, weaving despair into the very fabric of its existence. The sun, a weary sentinel, cast its feeble rays upon the ashen fields where crops lay withered, their lifeblood drained by a malevolent blight that had taken root in the hearts of the people. The air hung heavy with sorrow, and the laughter of children faded like echoes in a forgotten hall. In the heart of this desolation stood a solitary figure, a young hero named Alaric, whose spirit burned with the flickering flame of hope amidst the gathering darkness. Clad in a tattered cloak, his eyes, deep pools of determination, reflected the burden of his quest. For in the hushed whispers of the townsfolk, a tale had emerged, one that spoke of an ancient dragon hidden away in the mountains. A creature of legend who once blessed Eldoria with prosperity. If the dragon could be found, perhaps it could be convinced to lend its power to restore the kingdom. Alaric's heart raced as he listened to the fading tales spun by firelight. Old men recounted how the dragon's roar could summon rain, how its breath could breathe life into barren soil, and how, in times of strife, it had stood as a guardian against the forces of darkness. But the dragon had vanished, leaving only a legacy of mystery and an unfathomable riddle. What price must be paid to awaken it from slumber? As night draped its cloak over Eldoria, Alaric sought solace in the ancient library, a sanctuary of forgotten wisdom that had seen better days. The air was thick with dust, and the scent of parchment mingled with the aroma of old magic. With trembling hands, he opened tomes of yore, pages whispering secrets long buried. There, amidst the musty volumes, he stumbled upon an enigmatic prophecy written in flowing script. When shadows darken the light, and hope flickers in the night, seek the dragon, fierce and wise, but heed the cost, the heart despise. The words echoed in his mind, a siren's call that both inspired and terrified him. What cost could possibly warrant the dragon's return? Alaric's thoughts danced between fear and determination, igniting a fire within his chest. He could no longer ignore the plight of his people. They needed a hero, a beacon of hope to guide them from despair. With the flickering lantern casting ghostly shadows upon the stone walls, he resolved to seek out the dragon. Dawn broke with a hesitant light, casting a golden hue over the remnants of a once thriving kingdom. Alaric prepared for his journey, gathering what little supplies he could muster: a dagger, a weathered map, and a flask filled with the last drops of hope. As he stepped outside, he felt the weight of countless eyes upon him. the hope of a broken kingdom resting on his shoulders. The townsfolk, weary and gaunt, offered him solemn nods and whispered prayers as he passed, their hearts entwined with his fate. Guided by the prophecy, Alaric made his way to the Whispering Woods, a tangled expanse said to be alive with magic and mystery. Legends spoke of strange beings dwelling within, guardians of the forgotten paths, who might aid him in his quest. The trees loomed like ancient sentinels, their gnarled branches intertwining to form a canopy that swallowed the light, casting the forest floor into a perpetual twilight. Shadows danced at the edges of his vision, and the air thrummed with an energy that made the hairs on his neck stand on end. As he ventured deeper into the woods, he stumbled upon a clearing where a crystal-clear pond glimmered like a jewel. Kneeling beside it, he peered into the water, hoping for answers, but the surface remained still, reflecting only his troubled visage. It was then that a soft voice, like the rustle of leaves in the wind, beckoned him. "Brave one," it whispered, "seeker of the dragon's heart, what do you seek in this realm of shadows?" Startled, Alaric looked around, but the source of the voice eluded him. "I seek the dragon of Eldoria," he replied, his voice steady yet laced with uncertainty. "I must make a pact to save my kingdom." The water rippled, and from its depths emerged a shimmering figure, a spirit of the woods with eyes like molten gold. "The dragon you seek is a creature of ancient wisdom, but heed this: the path is fraught with peril. Many have ventured forth, but few return unscathed. The price of power is steep, and the heart may pay the ultimate toll." Alaric's heart raced, the weight of her words pressing upon him like a shroud. "I am willing to risk it. My people cannot suffer any longer." With a gentle nod, the spirit vanished into the water, leaving behind a trail of shimmering light that illuminated a path deeper into the forest. Alaric took a deep breath, steeling himself for the journey ahead. Shadows loomed in the distance, yet the flicker of hope within him burned brighter. He would seek the dragon, and he would uncover the truth behind the pact, whatever the cost. Thus began the quest of Alaric, a hero poised at the brink of destiny, where shadows danced and whispers lingered. A tale waiting to unfold in the pages of time. The path stretched before Alaric, winding deeper into the Whispering Woods, where the air itself seemed to hum with forgotten songs. Every step felt like a descent into a world not meant for mortal eyes, where the very trees leaned in close, listening to the secrets that passed between his lips. Shadows slithered across the forest floor, twisting in ways that defied the light. And every now and then, a soft murmur brushed against his ears. Words not quite heard, but sensed, like an ancient chant woven into the fabric of the world. The further he walked, the more the forest seemed to come alive, not with the chirps of birds or the rustle of woodland creatures, but with something older, something vast. Alaric could feel the weight of eyes upon him, unseen but undeniable. His breath quickened as the trees began to shift, their trunks elongating, their bark curling in strange patterns that resembled faces, watchful, silent. He pressed on, clutching the weathered map that had guided him thus far. But the ink on the page had begun to fade, dissolving into the parchment like mist under the morning sun. The landmarks, once clear and precise, now shimmered with uncertainty. Still, he moved forward, driven by the whispers of the prophecy and the desperate hope clinging to his heart. As the path narrowed, he came upon a fork in the road. To the left, a dense fog swirled, obscuring the way ahead, while to the right, a silver river meandered through the woods, its surface reflecting the pale light of a sun that was no longer visible through the canopy. Alaric hesitated, listening, hoping for some sign to guide him. It was then that a figure appeared, ethereal, cloaked in robes woven from the very mist itself. She moved without sound, her feet barely touching the ground as she approached. Her face, though obscured by a hood, radiated an ancient beauty that seemed both timeless and fleeting. Her eyes, pools of silver, met Alaric's, and in them he saw the weight of countless years. "You seek the dragon," she said, her voice soft and lilting, as though it had drifted on the breeze for centuries before reaching his ears. "I do," Alaric replied, though his voice faltered under the intensity of her gaze. The figure nodded, her expression unreadable. "You walk a dangerous path, young one. Many have come before you, lured by the dragon's promise of salvation, but none returned unscathed. The dragon's power is vast, but it is not given freely. The price, it is always paid." "What is this price?" Alaric asked, though he feared the answer. The woman's lips curved into a sad smile. "That is something only the dragon can reveal. But know this, once the pact is made, there is no turning back. The shadows you fear now will pale in comparison to the darkness that may follow." Her words echoed in the stillness, each syllable a ripple in the fabric of reality. Alaric's chest tightened with the weight of her warning, but he steeled himself, knowing that hesitation would doom his people. "I understand," he said, though doubt lingered in his heart like the fog curling around the trees. The woman raised her hand and the fog began to part, revealing a narrow, winding path through the mist. "Follow this road, and it will lead you to the dragon's lair. But remember, power comes at a cost. The question is, are you willing to pay it?" With a final glance, the figure dissolved into the mist, leaving Alaric alone once more. The silence that followed was unnerving, the absence of her presence like a void, yet the path before him was now clear. He took a deep breath, his resolve hardening like iron. As he ventured deeper into the fog, the forest seemed to shift again, this time subtly. The trees thinned, their trunks no longer twisting into grotesque shapes, but standing tall, their branches arching towards the sky. The air, once heavy and oppressive, grew lighter, filled with a strange scent that reminded Alaric of forgotten memories. Things that danced just at the edge of his mind, too elusive to grasp. The legends of the dragon swirled in his thoughts as he walked. They spoke of a creature older than time, whose wings spanned the horizon and whose breath could melt stone. Yet, the legends were also shrouded in mystery, for none truly knew the full extent of the dragon's powers or the reasons for its self-imposed exile. As night began to fall, casting long shadows across the path, Alaric knew that he was drawing close. The whispers of the woods had grown quieter, as if the forest itself held its breath, awaiting the meeting of man and beast. A chill ran down his spine, but he pressed on, knowing that the moment of reckoning was near. Ahead, he could just make out the outline of a great mountain, its peak lost in the clouds, and at its base, the faint glow of something ancient, something alive, flickered in the gloom. The dragon was near. The mountain loomed before Alaric, its jagged cliffs towering like the bones of some long-forgotten titan, etched against the twilight sky. Clouds clung to its peak, swirling in ominous patterns that mirrored the churning uncertainty in Alaric's heart. The faint glow he had seen from the distance was now brighter, flickering like an ember in the heart of the stone, beckoning him closer. The path to the dragon's lair was treacherous, a narrow trail that wound its way up the mountain's side, barely wide enough for a single person. The rocks beneath his feet were sharp, slick with the mist that seemed to seep from the very mountain itself. The air was thick with a strange heaviness, as though the mountain were alive, watching, waiting. Each step Alaric took felt like an intrusion, as though he were trespassing into a realm not meant for mortals. At the mouth of the cave, a silence fell over the world, a silence so deep it seemed to swallow sound, leaving only the steady rhythm of his heartbeat echoing in his ears. The cave entrance yawned before him, a black void carved into the mountain, its edges sharp as though it had been torn open by some great force. From within, a faint warmth pulsed, like the breath of some slumbering beast. With a final breath, Alaric stepped into the darkness, the weight of the prophecy heavy on his shoulders. The air inside the cave was thick and warm, tinged with the scent of ancient stone and something far more primal, like the memory of fire that had long since burned out. His footsteps echoed in the vast emptiness, a rhythmic beat that seemed to keep time with the flicker of light further ahead. As he ventured deeper, the walls of the cave shimmered with an eerie luminescence, veins of silver and gold running through the stone like the lifeblood of the mountain itself. The glow grew stronger with each step, and soon Alaric found himself standing before a cavern unlike anything he had ever seen. It was vast, an endless expanse of shimmering stone and glittering treasures that lined the walls like stars scattered across the night sky. Jewels, gold, and relics from forgotten times lay in heaps, each one reflecting the soft glow of the cavern. But amidst the treasure, Alaric's eyes were drawn to the figure at the center, a creature of immense size and terrifying beauty, coiled upon a bed of molten stone. The dragon. Its scales shimmered in the low light, each one a different shade of gold, silver, and bronze, creating a ripple of color that seemed to shift with every breath the creature took. Its eyes, two burning orbs of molten amber, opened slowly, locking onto Alaric with a gaze that felt as old as time itself. The dragon's wings folded against his body, stretched briefly, sending a gust of warm air through the cavern. For a long moment, neither spoke. Alaric stood rooted to the spot, his heart pounding in his chest, while the dragon merely observed, its gaze unreadable. There was a wisdom in its eyes, an ancient knowledge that spoke of worlds long forgotten and power beyond comprehension. Finally, the dragon's voice rumbled through the cavern, low and deep, like the sound of distant thunder. "You have come far, human," it said, each word a ripple in the air. "Few dare to seek me, and fewer still survive the journey. Tell me, why have you come?" Alaric swallowed, his throat dry as the weight of the moment settled upon him. "I seek your aid, mighty dragon," he began, his voice steady but low. "My kingdom is dying. A blight has spread across the land, and the people suffer. The crops wither, and darkness hangs over us. I have come to ask for your help, to make a pact that will save Eldoria." The dragon's gaze flickered, and a soft rumble echoed from its chest, a sound that might have been amusement or something far more dangerous. "A pact," it repeated, the word heavy with meaning. "You speak of pacts, yet you know not the weight of such a bond." Alaric straightened, summoning his courage. "I know there is a cost, but I'm willing to pay it. My people need me, and I cannot let them perish." The dragon's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, the air grew heavy with tension. Then, slowly the creature began to rise, its massive form unfurling like a great storm cloud. Its wings stretched wide, casting shadows that danced across the walls of the cavern. "There is always a cost, hero of Eldoria," the dragon said, its voice a soft hiss now, like the whisper of flames. "Power is not given freely, and the price is often far greater than one can bear. But if you are willing to make the pact, then I will grant you the power to save your kingdom." Alaric's heart raced as the dragon's words sank in. "What is the price?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The dragon smiled, a slow, predatory grin that revealed rows of gleaming teeth. "That, brave one, will be revealed in time. But know this, What you offer, you may never reclaim. The choice is yours. Alaric hesitated for only a moment before nodding. I accept. With that, the dragon's eyes gleamed, and the air around them crackled with a strange, ancient energy. The pact had been sealed, though its true cost remained hidden in the shadows, waiting to be revealed. The dragon's breath lingered in the air, a warm gust that smelled faintly of smoke and earth, as if the creature exhaled the very essence of the world's core. Alaric stood motionless before it, feeling the weight of the pact settle over him like an unseen shroud. Though no words had been etched into the stone, no blood spilled, he knew in the depths of his soul that something irreversible had taken place. The ancient magic between them, older than time itself, hummed in the silence. The dragon's eyes gleamed, twin suns set in the cavernous gloom, burning with a light that felt like it could pierce through flesh and bone to the very heart of a man. It moved slowly, uncoiling from its molten bed, its massive form gliding through the air like a shadow. The sound of its scales scraping against the stone echoed in the chamber, a slow, deliberate rhythm that sent shivers down Alaric's spine. You have accepted the pact, hero of Eldoria, the dragon murmured, its voice a low rumble that resonated through the walls. But know this, what you gain today, you may lose tenfold tomorrow. Are you prepared to carry that burden? Alaric swallowed hard, the dragon's warning echoing in his mind. But his thoughts were not on himself. They were on his kingdom, the fields reduced to ash, the people hollow-eyed with hunger, and the children who whispered of nightmares born from the blight. He could not allow himself to waver now. I am prepared, Alaric said, though the tremor in his voice betrayed the fear lurking just beneath his words. The dragon's gaze lingered on him, as if it was searching for something deeper, something hidden within the hero's soul. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, the dragon extended one great claw, sharp and gleaming, toward Alaric. The air crackled with energy, and the ground beneath Alaric's feet seemed to tremble in response. Then let the pact be sealed. The moment the dragon's claw touched his skin, Alaric felt a surge of power rush through him, an intense, burning force that seared his veins like liquid fire. His body stiffened as the magic coursed through him, filling every part of his being. It was both agony and ecstasy, a sensation that defied words, as though he were being remade from the inside out. His vision blurred, and for a brief, terrifying moment, he feared he might be consumed by the raw power that pulsed through him. Then, as quickly as it had begun, the pain receded, leaving behind only a faint echo of heat in his chest. Alaric gasped for breath, his legs trembling beneath him, but he remained standing. When he opened his eyes, the world seemed sharper, more vivid. The air around him shimmered with life, and the cavern walls glowed with a faint, otherworldly light. His senses were heightened, and he could feel the ancient magic thrumming within him, an untapped well of strength waiting to be called upon. The dragon watched him closely, its burning gaze unwavering. "The power of the dragon now flows within you," it said, its voice softer now, almost a whisper. "With it, you may save your kingdom from ruin. But remember, mortal, every gift comes with a price. The more you wield this power, the more it will demand of you." Alaric nodded, though the weight of the dragon's words pressed heavy on his mind. He could feel the magic inside him, a living thing, eager to be used. But there was an undercurrent, something darker, something he couldn't quite grasp, a shadow lurking at the edge of his consciousness. "What is the price?" Alaric asked, though he already suspected the answer. The dragon's smile was slow, deliberate, revealing teeth like polished obsidian. "Time will reveal all. For now return to your kingdom and use the power I have given you. But heed this. With every act of magic, you will give up something precious, something irreplaceable." Alaric felt a chill run through him, despite the warmth that still lingered in the air. The dragon's words twisted inside him, their meaning elusive yet haunting. But he had no choice. His people were suffering, and he had promised to save them. "I understand," he said, his voice quiet but resolute. With a final nod, the dragon folded its wings and turned away, its massive form disappearing into the shadows of the cavern. The glow of the treasures dimmed, and the air grew cooler, as if the very life of the cave was retreating back into the mountain's core. Alaric stood there for a long moment, feeling the weight of the Pact settle over him like a cloak of shadows. The dragon had given him what he sought, the power to save Eldoria. But the price, the true cost of this gift, still lingered just beyond his reach, like a dark star waiting to rise. With a heavy heart, he turned and made his way out of the cave. The path before him shrouded in mist and silence. The mountain was still, as if it too was watching, waiting for what would come next. As Alaric descended the mountain, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had left part of himself behind in that cavern, lost in the shadows that clung to the dragon's lair. What had the dragon taken from him? What would the magic demand in return? He did not know. But as he walked toward his kingdom, the whispers of the forest followed, like 1,000 voices murmuring his fate in the gathering dark. The path back to Eldoria seemed longer than before, each step heavy with the weight of the pact Alaric had made. The air around him crackled with the dragon's magic, an unseen force that clung to his skin like a second shadow. As he moved through the whispering woods, the trees that had once been watchful now seemed to bow before him, their branches creaking in reverence, or perhaps in fear. The world felt different, altered by the power now coursing through his veins. But beneath it all, Alaric could sense something else. A darkness, subtle and insidious, weaving itself into the fabric of his being. When he emerged from the forest, the kingdom of Eldoria lay before him, shrouded in the same gloom that had plagued it when he'd left. The fields were barren, the sky grey and low, as if the heavens themselves mourned for the dying land. Yet as Alaric approached, something within him stirred, an unfamiliar warmth, a pulse of energy that seemed to respond to the very earth beneath his feet. He stopped at the edge of a desolate field, where the crops had long since withered to dust, their husks crumbling at the slightest touch. Alaric knelt, placing his hand on the soil. It was cold and lifeless, but as he closed his eyes, he felt the dragon's power rise within him, coiling like a serpent ready to strike. The magic surged, flowing from his fingertips into the ground, and almost immediately the earth responded. A tremor passed through the field, subtle at first, then stronger, until the ground itself seemed to shift beneath him. The barren soil softened, darkened, and from the depths, shoots of green began to sprout, curling upward toward the sky. Alaric opened his eyes in disbelief as life returned to the land, the once dead field now teeming with a new growth. Flowers bloomed, their colors vibrant against the grey backdrop, and the air was filled with the sweet scent of renewal. He rose to his feet, the sensation of power still thrumming in his veins, though it had lessened, fading like the echo of a distant storm. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Alaric allowed himself a moment of hope. The dragon's magic had worked. The kingdom could be saved. But then, as the villagers began to gather around him, their faces lighting up with awe and disbelief, Alaric felt something shift inside him. It was small at first, a faint tug, like the loosening of a thread, but it grew stronger, more insistent. His mind clouded, and for a fleeting moment, he couldn't remember why he had come to this field in the first place. The faces of the villagers blurred, their names slipping from his memory like water through his fingers. A chill crept over him, though the air was warm. It was as though something precious had been taken from him, something he hadn't even realized was vulnerable. Alaric tried to shake the feeling, but it lingered, gnawing at the edges of his consciousness. As the villagers crowded around him, praising his name, he forced a smile, though his heart felt hollow. They spoke of miracles, of how their hero had restored life to the land, and how the kingdom would soon thrive again. Yet each word felt distant, as if spoken from across a vast chasm. Alaric could barely recall their voices, let alone their faces. And then he understood. This was the price. Not gold or blood, but memory. The dragon had warned him, though its words had been shrouded in riddles. The power he wielded came with a cost, one that would strip away the very essence of who he was. With each act of magic, he would lose pieces of himself, fragments of his past, his identity, his connection to the world. As the villagers continued their celebration, Alaric slipped away, retreating into the shadows where their eyes couldn't follow. His heart pounded in his chest, not from fear, but from the creeping realization that the Pact was far darker than he had imagined. The dragon's magic had restored the land, but it had also taken something irreplaceable: his memories of home, of friends long gone, of moments that had shaped him into the man he was. In the solitude of the quiet night, Alaric felt the weight of his sacrifice settle over him. The kingdom would flourish, but with each act of salvation, the cost would grow. How much more of himself would he lose before the magic claimed it all? The shadows around him seemed to pulse, echoing the question he dared not ask aloud. How long could he continue, and at what cost would Eldoria's salvation be secured? Alaric stared out into the darkness, the flicker of dragonfire still glowing faintly within him, a reminder of the pact he had sealed in the depths of the mountain. The price was already being paid, and the shadows of sacrifice loomed larger than ever. The days that followed were a blur, time slipping through Alaric's fingers like sand in an hourglass whose grains had been enchanted to vanish. The kingdom of Eldoria began to recover. Fields that had once been barren now blossomed with golden crops. Rivers that had dried to mere trickles swelled again with clear, cool water. And the gloom that had shrouded the sky lifted, revealing a sun that seemed to shine brighter than it had in years. The people hailed Alaric as their savior, their voices rising in song, their hearts swelling with gratitude. Yet for Alaric, the celebration was hollow. Every act of magic that restored the kingdom came with a deeper loss, a greater erosion of his sense of self. With each spell he cast, a memory slipped away, subtle at first, a face he could no longer recall, a name that dissolved from his mind before he could speak it. The first few sacrifices had been like distant echoes, faint and almost forgettable. But as the days wore on, the losses deepened. One afternoon, Alaric found himself standing before a crowd in the village square, summoned to heal a dying tree that stood at the heart of the town. Its branches, once lush and green, were now twisted and brittle, its roots digging deep into a parched earth. Alaric approached the tree, and as before, the dragon's magic stirred within him, a force that responded to his unspoken will. His hands hovered over the dying bark, and a wave of energy flowed from him into the tree. Life returned to the ancient wood, the branches creaking as leaves unfurled, rich and vibrant. The crowd erupted into cheers, their joy palpable. But as Alaric turned to meet their gaze, he realized something strange. He could no longer remember their faces. The smiles that surrounded him felt like masks, unfamiliar and distant. The people who had once been neighbors, friends, even family, were now strangers to him. Panic gnawed at his chest. He tried to recall his childhood, the familiar streets of Eldoria, the voices that had once been so dear to him. But all that greeted him was a void. Moments that had defined his past now felt like dreams, distant, elusive, dissolving the harder he tried to grasp them. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the world fell into twilight, Alaric sought refuge in the quiet solitude of the castle's courtyard. The weight of the day pressed heavily on him, but more than that, it was the weight of his dwindling self. The memories he had once clung to like a lifeline were slipping away faster now, leaving him adrift in a sea of uncertainty. He sat beneath an old oak tree, its branches swaying gently in the evening breeze. The smell of the earth, the rustle of leaves, these were sensations that felt familiar. And yet, even here, the edges of his thoughts blurred. What had once been his sanctuary, a place he had come to as a child, was now fading into something unrecognizable. As he sat there lost in the silence, a voice broke through the stillness, a soft, familiar voice that sent a shiver down his spine. Alaric. He turned to see a woman standing at the edge of the courtyard. Her face was gentle, her eyes warm with concern. But as she spoke his name, he felt nothing stir within him. There was no recognition, no flicker of memory to anchor him to her. She approached slowly, her steps tentative, as if she sensed the distance that had grown between them. "Alaric, it's me, Ilara," she said, her voice trembling. "Don't you remember?" He searched her face, trying desperately to pull some fragment of her from the depths of his mind. But it was like trying to grasp smoke. Ilara. The name felt familiar, but only in the vaguest sense, like a melody half forgotten. His heart ached with the knowledge that she had once meant something to him, something important, something deep. But now she was a ghost of a memory he could no longer reach. I don't," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper, her eyes filled with sorrow, and for a moment she seemed on the verge of tears. "You've been gone so long fighting for us, saving us, but I can see it in your eyes. You're slipping away." Alaric looked down at his hands, the hands that had healed the land, that had wielded the dragon's magic with such power. They felt foreign to him now, as though they belonged to someone else, someone who had been left behind the moment the pact was sealed. "I'm paying the price," he said softly, more to himself than to her. "The magic, it's taken everything." Ilara knelt beside him, her hand gently resting on his arm. "We need you, Alaric. The kingdom needs you, but not at the cost of losing yourself. There has to be another way." He shook his head, the weight of the dragon's pact pressing harder against his heart. I don't know if there is. As the darkness deepened around them, Alaric felt the full weight of his sacrifice settle over him like a mantle of shadows. The price was far greater than he had ever imagined, and he had already begun to lose the one thing he hadn't expected, the essence of who he truly was. The castle halls were shrouded in silence as Alaric wandered through them, each step echoing softly against the cold stone. The corridors that had once been familiar now felt foreign, like a dream slowly fading from his grasp. His own reflection in the tall windows seemed like a stranger, his face etched with shadows, his eyes hollow, as if pieces of him were unraveling with every passing hour. Ilara's words haunted him. There had to be another way. Yet every time he grasped at that hope, the dragon's presence stirred within him, a dark reminder of the pact he had sealed. It was a pact that bound him to an ancient magic far beyond his understanding, a magic that now exacted its toll with ruthless precision. He could feel it in his bones, in the way his thoughts slipped away like water through clenched fists, leaving him emptier each day. The kingdom prospered, fields lush with crops, rivers full and clear, and the people thriving. But at what cost? With every spell he cast to restore the land, he lost more of himself. Memories that had once defined him vanished into the mist. And now, even the faces of those he had loved were dissolving into nothingness. He could scarcely remember his own name some days, as if the magic was slowly consuming him from the inside out. Unable to bear the weight of his thoughts, Alaric found himself once again drawn to the castle's courtyard, where the old oak tree stood sentinel beneath the night sky. It was the only place that still felt remotely real to him, though even its presence was fading from his mind. The wind whispered through the branches, and for a moment he thought he heard the faintest echo of a familiar voice, but it vanished before he could catch its meaning. He sank to the ground beneath the tree, staring up at the stars that blinked through the canopy of leaves. They too seemed distant now, as if the very sky was receding from his grasp. He closed his eyes, trying to summon even a fragment of memory. His mother's face, his father's voice, the laughter of friends from long ago. But the harder he tried, the more the memories slipped away, like sand scattered on the wind. A rustle of footsteps broke through his thoughts, and Alaric's eyes opened to see a figure approaching him. In the dim light of the moon, he recognized her. Elara, her face etched with concern, her eyes searching his as if trying to find the man she had once known. "You shouldn't be alone," she said softly, kneeling beside him. Her voice trembled, though she tried to hide it, as if the sight of him unraveling before her was more than she could bear. Alaric stared at her, trying desperately to recall the bond they had once shared. He knew there had been love, deep and unyielding, but the memory of it had been stolen from him. The dragon's magic had hollowed out the part of him that held those feelings, leaving only the cold certainty of his power and the price he had paid to wield it. "Elara," he said, his voice hoarse with the weight of his loss. "I can't remember. I try, but it's like grasping at shadows. Every day I lose more of myself." She reached out, her hand gently resting on his. "You're still here," she whispered. "The real you, the man I knew, he's still here. We can find a way to break this pact before it takes everything." Alaric shook his head, the hopelessness rising in his chest. "The magic, it's too strong. The dragon bound me to it. I can't undo what's been done." Elara's grip tightened on his hand. "There must be a way. We'll find it together. You don't have to fight this alone." For a moment, her words stirred something deep within him. A flicker of the man he had been before the pact. He remembered flashes, brief, fleeting images of their time together. Laughter shared beneath this very tree. The warmth of her touch. The sound of her voice calling his name. But just as quickly as they appeared, the memories dissolved into nothingness, leaving him more hollow than before. "I'm afraid, Elara," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm afraid of what I'll become if I keep using this power. But if I stop, the kingdom will fall back into ruin. What choice do I have?" Elara's eyes shimmered with unshed tears as she gazed at him, her heart breaking for the man she loved. "A kingdom isn't worth losing yourself, Alaric. The land may flourish, but what will be left if its savior is lost?" Her words struck him deeply, and for the first time, Alaric felt the full weight of the choice before him. He had sacrificed so much already. His memories, his sense of self. But the deeper question lingered. How much more was he willing to lose? The dragon's power had restored Eldoria, but it had hollowed him out in the process, leaving him nothing more than a shell of the hero he once was. "I don't know if I can undo what I've done," he said, his voice trembling with the truth. "But I can't keep losing myself." Elara's hand tightened in his, her eyes filled with determination. "Then we'll find a way, together." And in that moment, beneath the starlit sky, Alaric realized that perhaps the true battle wasn't for the kingdom at all. It was for his own soul. The night stretched endlessly, draped in a heavy, unbroken silence that mirrored the weight in Alaric's chest. He stood at the edge of the kingdom, the once fertile fields, now rippling in the cool breeze like waves of green, restored by the magic that had taken so much from him. The people had gathered behind him, watching their hero in quiet reverence, unaware of the internal storm raging within him. They saw only the savior who had brought Eldoria back from the brink. But Alaric knew that the cost had been far greater than any of them could imagine. Elara stood by his side, a constant presence, even in the moments when the world around him felt like a dream unraveling. Her words from the night before echoed in his mind, a plea for him to save himself, to find a way to break free from the dragon's pact before it consumed him entirely. But here, standing at the precipice of what seemed like an impossible decision, Alaric could feel the pull of the dragon's magic stronger than ever. It thrummed in his veins, a deep and ancient force that promised power, promised salvation. If only he would continue to use it. The dragon's voice slithered through his thoughts, a whisper from the shadows that had bound him to this path. "You can still save them," it murmured. "You can save them all, but you know the price, and you have already begun to pay it. Why stop now, when you hold the fate of the kingdom in your hands?" Alaric's hands trembled at his sides, the weight of the choice pressing down on him like a shroud. Every part of him felt split in two, one half bound to the kingdom, the other to the remnants of himself that still lingered, faint and fading. He had already given so much, lost so much, that the idea of giving up felt like betrayal. But continuing down this path meant losing the very essence of who he was. Elara's voice broke through the silence, soft but steady. "You don't have to do this alone," she whispered. "There is still a way, Alaric. The kingdom doesn't need the dragon's magic. It needs you, the real you." Her words felt like a lifeline cast into a storm, but the dragon's magic surged within him, coiling like a serpent around his soul. It was seductive, this power. It offered certainty, control, and the promise that he could prevent any future suffering. But the cost was everything he had once been. With a sudden terrifying clarity, Alaric understood the true nature of the pact. The dragon had not simply offered power in exchange for a price. It had offered a slow unraveling, a gradual erasure of the self. The more Alaric used the magic, the more he became a vessel for it, until one day there would be nothing left of him at all. Only the dragon's power, an empty force without a soul to wield it. His heart thundered in his chest as he turned to face Elara, her eyes wide with worry, yet glowing with an unspoken trust. She believed in him, even when he barely believed in himself. For so long, Alaric had thought the fate of Eldoria rested solely on his shoulders, that he alone could bear the burden of saving the kingdom. But now, standing here at the crossroads of destiny, he realized that the path to salvation was not one he had to walk alone. "Elara?" he said, his voice hoarse with the weight of the decision he was about to make. "I can't keep doing this. I can't keep giving pieces of myself away. The magic is too much. It's taking everything." She stepped closer, her hand gently touching his arm. "Then let it go," she whispered. "We'll find another way. The kingdom will find a way to heal, just like we will. But you have to choose. You have to decide who you want to be." The wind stirred around them, carrying with it the faintest echo of the dragon's voice. One last whisper, dark and lingering. Choose, hero, but know that once the power is gone, so too are your dreams of saving them all. Alaric closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the dragon's presence for what he hoped would be the final time. His heart ached with the loss he had already endured, the memories that had slipped away into the void, never to return. But he knew now that if he didn't stop, he would lose far more than memories. He would lose the very essence of who he was, of what it meant to be human. With a deep breath, Alaric summoned the last of the magic that remained within him, feeling it coil and pulse one final time. Then, with a trembling exhale, he let it go. The dragon's power unraveled from his soul, slipping away like the last vestiges of a dying flame. The magic dissipated into the air, leaving behind only silence and the cool touch of the evening breeze. Alaric stood still, feeling both the weight and the freedom of his decision. The kingdom was still before him, its fate uncertain, but for the first time, Alaric felt a quiet sense of peace. Elara stood beside him, her hand still resting on his arm, her presence a reminder of the life he had fought so hard to keep. Together, they would find a way to rebuild, to heal what had been broken. And in the quiet of the evening, as the last remnants of the dragon's pact faded into the night, Alaric knew that he had made the right choice. He had chosen himself.